Hello! Gonna have to move the Discord over here. Hello, everyone! Gonna let some people flock in. So, this is a GDC video I haven't yet watched, and I'm actually pretty excited about this one. I hope this is one of those hidden gem videos. Hey, Kesdiv! You're gonna be able to watch this one. You're gonna be able to watch this one. Hey, Silver. Big chocolate pudding with a sword. He's not chocolate, he's like red goo. Watch. Look at this. Do you have moves like this? So, the idea with him is that, you go down here. This is a placeholder house. You would go down here, you'd fight this guy, and he would block every attack you made. And you'd have to figure out a different way of fighting him. And the reason I specifically want to do this GDC talk is because I'm probably going to have to nix this whole design and come up with something better. I'll probably reuse the sprite for something interesting. But sadly, this experimentation is just not really working out that well. So, I figured, let's do a GDC talk specifically about boss design, and maybe we can cook something fun up. Hey Amgene, hey Thoreau, hey Dinomatrix, hey Northern Burger. Good thumbnail, we were just talking about the Shadow of the Colossus remake, were you? That's good. Yeah, the thumbnail, so, if you will let me, sometimes I just reuse the GDC thumbnails because they look nice. This is one of those cases I don't. This is what their thumbnail looks like. It's just a lot. It's just bloated with text. There's, you can't really make out what's in the background. Maybe if you've played this game here, you know what boss fight this is. But, yeah, I decided, let's clean it up some. Is this a stream where we talk about everything but the video topic? I think, this is a very broad topic. There's a lot of games going to be brought up here, and a lot of different philosophies for approaching boss design that we're going to be talking about. So, maybe. Also, as always, you are solely responsible for the audio quality. Hey, Dishwasher. Only disagreeing with the chocolate pudding. No, Adak, you didn't miss anything. Hello. But yeah, let's get started.
All right.
Hello.
My name is Karen. I made a game called Mushroom 11, released a couple of years ago.
Okay, so it's a background from his game, and that's totally fine. But I really wish they hadn't bloated the screen with text on the thumbnail, because you couldn't really make out what it was. But yeah, his name is Ite Karen. This is from 2018. This is pre-COVID. Can you guys imagine such a thing?
It's a game with very peculiar and weird mechanics and even weirder bosses. I also made a research a couple of years ago on 2D cameras, and I decided to combine my two passions and try to create this retrospective of game bosses and what we can learn from, using references from older to more modern games.
There was a time before COVID. I remember it. It was long ago.
What is a game boss? A standard definition would look a little bit like this. A significant computer
Also, is the audio good? Everybody can hear everything?
Enemy who must be defeated to achieve a goal or continue progress. But we all know that the bosses that we remember and we like usually have one or more of these items as an exception to this rule. And from what I noticed, it is closer to just an epic confrontation that serves as a microcosm of your game while temporarily breaking its rules. So the boss battle is
an epic confrontation that serves as a microcosm of your game while temporarily breaking its rules. There are bosses like this. I don't think this is a great way of characterizing every boss.
Definitely part of your game. You need to feel as part of the unit, which is your game, but it's uniquely qualified to break any and all of the rules.
There's a lot of that, but this is not a very good universal rule. Certainly Shadow of the Colossus' bosses don't really do that.
Why do you need a boss? I basically look at it as 4 different sections. Reward, take a break from normal gameplay and reward players' persistence with a new experience and a chance at a major triumph. Dazzle, surprise the player with an unexpected.
Pedro, you didn't miss anything. We're just a minute in, basically. I would say it works at least for Souls-likes. Yeah, I can see that though, because those games. But even then, I mean, I guess we'll talk a bit more about it when he's sort of laid out his case a bit better.
Play experience, engage, use the battle to advance the story or create emotional attachment, and challenge, of course, that test and acquire skill, introduce new skills in preparation for what's next, and we're going to talk about all these.
I actually think that the best utilization of bosses is pacing. I think that gamers have just sort of ingrained this idea that when they're fighting a big boss, it's because a segment of a game is about to close, and the tone, the pacing, the energy of the next few encounters, the next few levels is going to go down again. So if you want to separate your game up into chapters, put in some boss fights.
How we can dazzle the players with unexpected confrontation while creating a lasting first impression.
Oh, breaking health pools and attack patterns. Yeah. That's fair. That's fair.
All right. So what's the most important element, even going back to 1975, this is what's considered possibly the first boss battle. It's basically just an enemy with an unexpected strength. It is way more powerful than the player expected. It's also very unlikely for you to win against the dragon in the dungeon.
When you're fighting big boss, you know the game's going to end.
Kind of the thread that goes across pretty much all boss battles. An easy way to create, or like the standard way of creating a boss that feels invincible, is using the size. This is Mothership from Phoenix from 1980, what I consider probably the first modern boss. The size is so large it also feels like it's almost impossible to defeat. This is possibly one of the...
Okay, this boss here, Mega Man 1, this boss is complete ass. Yellow Devil.
Best boss battles of all time. I'm going to talk about it a lot.
No, this is not one of the best boss battles of all time. This boss is such a dog shit.
And this is a great example of how we can...
Or actually, maybe because I played it on the 3DS emulator, I'm willing to concede that maybe the emulation was effing me a little bit, but when he turns into little balls and starts zooming around, the hitbox detection was completely in the toilet. And it's like a really long level, so if he beats you, you have to go so far back.
Technology in order to create the illusion of size and how tech can serve the design. In this case, it was running on the NES. The NES has a limitation of 64 foreground sprites. Each one of them is 8x8 or 8x16, which means that they had to create a boss mostly on the background, and every time a piece needed to move from one side to the next, they moved it to the foreground, animated it, and then put it back to the background.
There's a lot of this in... there's a lot of this sort of wizardry on the NES. I believe Mario himself is actually comprised, and Super Mario Bros. Is actually composed of 2 separate sprites. Yeah, it's just shit. Okay. Literally the worst boss in Mega Man. Funny how he's like the best, as Aesir says it's terrible. Yeah. Tell that to Bloodborne and the Triple End bosses. Tell what to Bloodborne and the Triple End bosses. Sorry, I zoomed out of chat for a little bit. For what I know from Cadicarus, his experience was an ass because of the hitbox, but the challenge itself was a nice idea. Yeah, this is a fun idea, but it's just... I think it really is just the... I don't know exactly what it is. Maybe the boss room is just too small. I think also the if we go back a little bit and just watch this, I think the boss is pretty bad at telegraphing itself.
Which means that they had to create a boss.
You have a bit, obviously I'm playing it at a slightly faster speed, but you just have a split second to sort of gauge which one is going to come up. And I love Mega Man 1, but it is a lot of... You're going to die a lot because the developers put some crap in there, and you just got to sort of memorize a lot of the game. And that's not to say that can't be fun, but I feel like that's more fun in when it's for an interesting encounter, and preferably when you don't die, when it just throws you down a pit and you have to work your way back up. I think it's more fun in that sense. Whereas this comes really late into a pretty long and hard level, and it's just... I didn't love it.
Mostly on the background, and every time...
Hey, Bradley!
From one side to the next, they moved it to the foreground, animated it, and then put it back to the background.
I heard that Lies of P is terrible because of little to no telegraphed attacks throughout the whole game. Ooh, could that be? I haven't played Lies of P. I hear good things from some of my friends. I hear some of my friends don't really love it. But yeah, I haven't played it. Now we're talking about Malice, the best boss in Shadow of the Colossus.
2 decades later, and another game used incredible technology for the time. This is Shadow of the Colossus. We're going to talk about that game a lot.
I love how he's like talking about the NES, the manipulation of the different sprite layers, and he's like, wow, and then we have Shadow of the Colossus 2 decades later, and it's also another amazing utility of technology. And like both are really pushing the hardware, but obviously one game is a technological marvel and the other one is Mega Man 1.
He created a physics system that's based on partially dynamic, huge objects that influence the protagonist with its own inverse kinematics. Moving forward through the years, God of War is a franchise that has some epic bosses, huge bosses.
Lack of good telegraphing really ruins games. Oh yeah. Yeah. I actually have I don't want to go too often. I don't have it open. But like for all enemies, I have had to basically insert a few frames where the enemy is just stationary, just so that you know I'm about to attack you, dude. And I think my game has become way too easy because I did it, but you know, it's fine. It's not supposed to be a hard game.
When we're trying to continuously surprise the player, they end up increasing the size of the boss continuously. The bosses in God of War allow you to change the rules during play. In this case, the second phase of the boss is a level in itself where you need to battle the boss from the inside. And all the way to the comically large, this is Don Rising from Asura's Wrath. The last phase of this boss is larger than
a boomer hating on boomer
course,
games.
At some point it becomes
nice try.
The same battle, obviously, so it allows you to completely change the rules.
Go off topic.
We're going to talk about
guys, I don't go off topic that often. I gotta tell you.
Surprising the player, and that is probably one of the best examples of how we would be able to surprise the player in pretty much every aspect. This is Sinistar from 1982 from Noah Falstein and team. They were able to create a space game where that completely was different from the space games of the time, both in terms of visuals.
This looks really chaotic.
The mechanics is much more complicated, and it's mostly known for its crazy digitized voice. Again, to surprise the players, you can use all sorts of methods. Scare the hell out of the players, as you've seen in many of the bosses in Silent Hill franchise.
Oh my God! It's Kegare, guys. It's a centipede. I hunger. Phases bosses can be done poorly because you might struggle to hit the chains, and then you discover you still have more bosses and wasn't able to engage your resources well. Frida. Yeah. Played a bit of the Shadow of the Colossus on the recent PlayStation 4 remaster, but never really got that far into it. Not sure why. It's because you don't appreciate good things, Bradley. God. It all comes back to Kekere. Well, right? If you're going to talk about good boss fights, Dark Eco Skeet from Jak and Daxter, The Lost Frontier is peak. I've played 20 minutes of Jak and Daxter, The Lost Frontier, and I put that game down. I put it down hard because that game was ass. They just ripped all of the platforming out. Absolutely ridiculous. Unacceptable. But maybe the bosses won. I don't know. Silent Hill and Souls Worlds are connected. Somebody made a video talking about Kekere and Silent Hill once. Lost Frontier's balls, yeah. Sky Heat. Okay.
Many of the bosses in Silent Hill franchise. And of course, this memorable boss, the Great Mighty Pooh from Conker's Bad Fur Day. Using humor, and the presentation was something that I think everybody who played this game really remembers it well.
I've never actually played Conker's Bad Fur Day, but I think it's a game I would have loved when I was younger.
And of course, there are bosses in games that you wouldn't expect to have bosses. This is Mario Kart DS. Surprisingly, has bosses as well.
Oh my God! It's a bunch of floating hands. It's one of those sorts of bosses. Every game has them.
Various different types of surprises.
I'm personally insulted, but fair.
moving on, engage. We can use the gameplay, the pause in gameplay to tell a story, build anticipation towards the battle, and revel in its outcome. So the stories back in the early days of video games were mostly the traditional story frame. Boy saves a girl. You probably remember that there's a thread in Miyamoto's work. And even moving on, this is Karateka.
I feel like this presentation might have benefited from a bit better audio mixing. I feel like the games are way louder than him.
Time period. Use the same damsel in distress cliche, but in this case, they used a lot of cutscenes to create narrative progression and apply some foreshadowing.
Nobody played Conquer's Bad Fur Day. It's funny about Conquer's Bad Fur Day is that you have to really disassociate from the industry you've come to know and cast your mind back 20, 25 years and think that Rare decided to make a game completely for nobody because they got a couple of reviews saying that their shtick was running thin. Like, oh yeah, it's another Rare game, like Donkey Kong 64, or it's another Banjo-Kazooie. It's just like a kid-friendly action adventure platformer game, not so much action. And they were like, oh yeah, well we're gonna destroy our Conquer game and we're gonna make it R-rated.
Create anticipation engagement towards
never do that today.
With Akuma. And now the bosses are perfectly capable now to present a story in a way deeper method. This is Joker from.
This is a shit boss though.
And the Arkham series is one of the most amazing, has the most amazing bosses and great storytelling.
I feel like obviously the Mr. Freeze fight from Arkham City is the best boss in this entire franchise. This is such a bad boss though.
Is already dead, but is trying to battle its.
It's like a walking sim boss, while Mark Hamill reads off dialogue.
As the Joker, which is an amazing way of telling the story, and creates this epic intro towards it. And if we're talking about the epic intros, I still have shivers down my spine remembering this moment, the first boss in Shadow of the Colossus, creating the silence before the storm in preparation for the first.
All right, this is good stuff though.
Another fantastic boss is Bob Barbas from DMC. This Bill O'Reilly / Max Headroom, just the presentation for this fight.
Okay,
this rage
I love this boss room. You're like, because every news station for some reason has these crazy geometric graphics. I think it's really cool that you can sort of like platform through it and have to fight this guy.
This fight creates this rage and again builds anticipation towards the battle. Going back to the Arkham.
Aesir hating on the Joker section, probably the most epic ending of any Batman work. So here's the thing. Every single piece of Joker in Arkham Knight was dog shit. They should have kept him dead. I'm like, oh, well, he's still dead. It's just like in Batman's mind. It's shit. It's complete dog shit. They should have just kept him dead. Don't involve him in the story because you ended it perfectly in Arkham City. It's fine. It was fine.
Series. The intros for the battles in this series really allow you to throw the players off.
Oh my god, do you guys remember?
In this case, this is kind of a glitch that they put into the intro to this battle. When the player sees this thing, they are immediately kind of thrown off their element.
Okay, sir.
Battle even heightened. And for talking about breaking the fourth wall, we all remember Psycho Mantis from Metal Gear Solid.
See what I'm talking about with the audio mixing?
Psycho Mantis reading your save files.
I wonder if this guy, before he started doing his conference, he was like, wow, everybody at the conference, you gotta tell me if the audio and the videos is too loud.
What games you like, forcing you to unplug your controller in order to proceed with the battle. That really challenges the boundaries of what the game can do, and I believe that the boss battle can really allow you, it's uniquely qualified to do just that.
You know, when they announced that the Xbox One would have the Kinect always on, one of the interesting, that's obviously a dog shit decision, and I really am happy that they backpedaled hard on that, but theoretically, if the game always had a camera looking at you, they could have taken a photo of your face and put it in the game, like wrapped it around the face of another character. And Hideo Kojima would have had a field day with that thing.
The boss battle can really allow you, it's uniquely qualified to do just that.
Bosses are overrated.
And
you're overrated.
Having some outlet and a short break, allowing you to relish and gloat in the results of the battle, and of course advance.
That's a good sequence when you press the joysticks and he gouges his eyes out.
And It might be the first true outro. It's also quite grotesque. This is Hitler from Wolfenstein 3D with its famous DefCam TM.
Hitler,
As a
that
anecdote, I had to
guy.
look up DefCam TM and realize that it was indeed a trademark by PUBG, PlayerUnknown Battleground, which is funny because Killcam is owned by Activision, so I think that tells the story. Anyway, all right, moving on to battle setup. We can fit the boss to its environment and vice versa, figure out the timing and post-battle results and boss sequencing and interconnection. Another early boss battles can be found in Kung Fu Master. This is the true level boss. It literally is the boss at the end of every level, and also creates an anticipation using the enemy health bar that is visible throughout the level.
Oh, that's actually pretty interesting. I guess that's a bit like the radio in Silent Hill, where you enter an area and this, like when you get close to the boss, you get the boss's health bar on the screen, and it's like, okay, anticipation. You're about to meet this guy.
Level also creates an anticipation using the enemy health
Patent
bar.
trolling. Yeah, I think that I'm more or less on the page that like it is insane to me to think that concepts can be patented, like software concepts, and you know the whole patent legal apparatus is a complete mess.
Visible throughout the level. There's the ending boss, which I played Bubble Bubble multiple times. I never reached level 100, and I didn't even know it had a boss. But there are a few games in history that had a single boss. But there's also the intro boss. This is Fury from 2016, which is, I think, a perfect way of introducing the game by starting with a bang, really. So instead of having...
I recall pretty much liking Fury, but I had to put it down because after every boss there was just like this sequence of you have to hold the stick in so the character walks and has a voice talking at him, and I'm like, man, I can't do this. I can't do this. Nintendo wants to know my address. I don't think Nintendo is super litigious about patents, though. I think Nintendo's patent trolling mostly has to do with if they don't patent it, then somebody else will, and then they can come at Nintendo. I think that's the idea. I think Sony is very similar, where you know, they mostly don't go after somebody for actually doing this stuff. It's just to sort of cover their asses. Nintendo actually is very much caught by some... I don't know why there are so many lawyers working for Nintendo. It is really weird to me.
Some endless cutscenes telling you what to do. You can start with the boss, teaches you everything that you need to know.
You played the... hey, you can't swear in my streams.
You battle Nemesis multiple times and in completely unexpected timing every time, so it creates this lingering anticipation and this long engagement. This choice of timing, as we've seen in Bioshock, you choose when to engage your first Big Daddy, and it has some meaningful results for later.
Yeah, I also on timing. Well, what's he gonna say about Chrono Trigger?
Big Daddy, and it has some meaningful results for later. Chrono Trigger from '95 had a particular interesting way of giving you a choice of timing. The timeline in which you engage with Lavos really changes the outcome, and there are 13 different endings based on the timeline. Going back.
All right. So timing. I think that kind of goes to what I was saying earlier, where I guess I could add that here, where it's a good use. A boss is well used to set the tone, to reset the pacing of the game.
Back to Psychomantis, again, there's so many things to analyze in this battle, but one of the things the small details that I really enjoy is the fact that how they connect the boss to its environment. So the boss, even using telekinesis, it attacks you with picture frames and phases, which I think it's a great idea. Once again, the Great Mighty Pooh, well connected to its environment, attacks you with poop, and you retaliate by throwing an oversized toilet paper into its gaping mouth.
Ew, nasty. This is a very broad sort of topic. Oh yeah, hey everybody, what's your favorite boss? Just sort of throwing out random sentences about stuff. Yeah, I'd wish he was. I'd wish he'd be a bit more focused. Maybe cull the games you're talking about by half and be a bit more specific about what it is that you like about these. Metal Gear Solid was so nuts. You know, the cool thing about Metal Gear Solid was that it was a little bit nuts. You're right.
Right.
Oh, the Great Mighty Poop is Keikare.
So,
that's true.
The boss with the minions, that's pretty obviously creating this unified approach. We remember even from Super...
Connected with minions, mini-bosses. Yeah, I mean,
that
Like, yeah,
Bowser is
okay.
actually the king of
That's
the
just theming.
world,
That's good.
visually looks
But I don't think there's a lot to that.
to some of them.
Certainly, you can always, I guess, you could connect two separate ideas together by having a boss and enemies that look similar, but I don't know.
Although another anecdote is that originally it was designed by Miyamoto as an ox.
Ew.
He challenged and changed later. Looking
Hey, the master Miyamoto has made some mistakes. Okay.
again at Super Mario Brothers, the connection between the boss battles, basically you're battling Bowser every time.
Would Middle-earth Shadow War boss design combined with ChatGPT be interesting? I don't know. Maybe. I don't really think it needs ChatGPT. I think it's fine as is. I always thought that contrary to many PlayStation 1 games, Metal Gear Solid aged so gracefully like the finest wine. It did. It did. They really got a lot out of that little machine. I think it's a bit of the tabletop idea of a boss is literally the minions boss. Oh yeah. Bosses with minions as a part of the fight when it's unneeded drives me up the wall. Yeah, I think that it's very often just sort of it's very often just a case of, well, the boss, it's kind of shit, so we just decided to add a couple of guys to kind of make it a bit harder or whatever. But when they actually do the job of integrating the smaller minion guys into the fight, like Phalanx in Demon Souls, I think it could be amazing. You'd choose intricate levels over some arena with a boss. Yeah, but like I always like a boss fight. I like a good boss. I think that a good boss is a great cap off to a level. Is that a cap or demon rat?
With slightly increasing difficulty, so and every time you're sent to a different castle. But some games really make a point in creating this elaborate story and interconnection between the different bosses. This is Undertale. And every boss has a connection both narratively, thematically, even in terms of UI, to the previous bosses, and uses everything that you learned from previous bosses, and eventually challenges everything. So every boss feels like it breaks some rule that was established previously. This is the spider from Limbo. I definitely believe it's a legitimate boss. You battle it multiple times in the first part of the game. And again, there are plenty of cases where...
Yeah, I guess you could argue this is a spider.
And in every challenge...
I guess you could argue this is a boss.
Personally, my second boss in Mushroom 11 was a direct tribute to the spider boss in Limbo, including the part where you use the spider's body to move over the acid pit. Which is a quick point that I wanted to make. In Mushroom 11, after you defeat the boss, there's always an additional challenge that you need to cross. You need to physically cross over to the next world, which I thought was pretty interesting and clever, but to be honest, this is not something I would do again.
I think that the Link to the Past approach to boss design and the Shadow of the Colossus approach is really the correct one, where A Link to the Past really incorporates the dungeon gimmick into the boss design itself. So in this dungeon, you get the ability to spawn fire, and what do you know? The boss just happens to be, you have to fight him with fire. The best boss in A Link to the Past, I think his name is like Argius or something like that. He's that big eyeball who has like those little clouds floating above him, and it's the hookshot boss. And you need to shoot hookshots at him to drag those eyeballs to you, and slash at them to destroy them. That's an amazing boss, and it's wild to me that when they went to 3D, I get it when they make the slingshot, hookshot dealy first person, but my god, that thing should have been third person. That's ridiculous. Like, obviously you want to teach the player to think in 3D spaces and such, but it's just so much fun to shoot a hookshot in A Link to the Past. But for Shadow of the Colossus, I really like them. Ueda talked about this, Fumito Ueda talked about them as inverted Zelda dungeons. I talked about it in the video I made on the game. But I just love that approach of, rather than, like in a Zelda dungeon, you get a key, and the key opens a door. Well, in the Shadow of the Colossus dungeon, which is just the bosses, you get the boss to expose themselves. and then you climb up the boss. And it's the exact same fundamental idea, but it's just integrated into a boss. It's muy bueno, muy bueno. The Kraken in the ship in Skyward Sword is your favorite Zelda boss? Ooh, Pedro, what are you doing to me? What are you doing to me? Any difficulty is artificial because all games are artificial.
Because when the player believes that, or they see that triumph, they believe that they can proceed to the next level, and instead we're challenging them and immediately throwing them back into a new challenge, kind of watering down this excitement and satisfaction. Wouldn't hurt to just continue automatically, or find a different way to present this challenge. All right, skill, mastery, and teaching. So we're going to talk about the skills, how we can design a challenge to test a specific skill.
I do like what he said, though, about after every boss, you have to do something to cross a gap or like navigate over a pit or something like that. I think that's fun. I think that's kind of cool. Like integrating a specific challenge where every time you defeat a boss, you also have to figure out how to use the boss's corpse to get from A to B. I think that's kind of a cool idea. An Indian Aesir with a Russian accent speaking Spanish, watching a video on Japanese-American video games. That's true. That's true.
And how to increase the difficulty and combine multiple skills, and of course the undivided attention that we have to teach new skills. This is the first boss from Shinobi, a game that I really like. That boss is pretty much a test for jump and shoot. And it's basically a skill gate for that specific skill. If you don't know,
I like
test for jump and shoot.
I like him being defeated like oof. He's like really gassed out here.
And it's basically a skill gate for that specific skill. If you don't know how to jump and shoot, you wouldn't survive a minute in the next level.
Okay, that's an idea that I also really like, where here are mechanics that are going to be essential to playing the rest of the game, and here's the boss. If you can clear, you have to have a solid mastery of these core controls, and if you don't have them, you can't play the rest of the game. So, we're going to design a boss here that's going to really test you on your grasp of these mechanics. And if you have a good grasp of them, you can beat them. And that sort of locks you from experiencing the game that you're not really prepared for. Sekiro, I think, made the huge mistake of putting that boss pretty late. It's either Genichiro or the Guardian Ape, depending on who you ask. I think they really should have had that, and I guess they had that with what's his name, Hybe? No, not Hybe. Oh God, I can't remember. The sword teaching guy near the shrine, but he's optional. I really feel like they should have had something like this earlier, where, you have to actually master the parrying, the clashing of katanas. You need to actually get this very deeply integrated into your head. And I like Boltius was this for Armored Core 6 very early on. Really great, really great. A lot of articles. Oh my God, the game's too hard. This boss is too hard. And then a week later, like nobody's writing those articles. Nobody takes these articles seriously because everybody's like, "Oh no, it wasn't hard. I just needed to learn how to play the game."
This is Father Gascoigne from Bloodborne.
The great Boltius filter. Yeah.
So Father Gascoigne is essential.
Yeah, like Father Gascoigne. I think he's another good example of this. Just hey, if you want to destroy this guy, just parry him. You just parry him 4 or 5 times in a row, he is dead. And every attack he does, except his shotgun, can be parried. And, he takes a lot of health off of you, but he's also really exposed a lot of the times, and so you can just really get a good sense for the rallying mechanic. And if you play Bloodborne the way Bloodborne is supposed to be played, Father Gascoigne is really easy. If you try to play Bloodborne as a Dark Souls game, brother, you're not going to make it.
Really a skill gate for parrying, and allows you to test the basics before increasing the difficulty. Of course, it's not always physical skills. This is Aetian from the Vault of Glass. This is essentially the ultimate test of communication skill and collaboration between raid members. One of my favorite things is teaching you a new skill. This is King Bob-omb from Super Mario 64.
This is King Bomber. These captions are ridiculous. King Babam, I like this boss.
We are using this undivided attention and no distractions around the boss to teach you something new, which is something that's very, very important when you're teaching, to not have distractions, and we introduce a new skill. This is the skill is grab and throw, and we're basically providing a reason for you to utilize that new skill. This boss particularly does a very clever psychological trick of priming, because if you don't know what you need to do, you can just sit back and see the boss doing the same thing, and that primes you to think about grabbing and throwing.
Notifications!
Once again,
Sorry guys, I'm just too popular.
I think bosses are...
Somebody sent me a video.
Of introducing the basic...
It's a video of Jensen Ackles.
Is the first thing that you see, and teaches you all the basic
I'm gonna put my
mechanics and
phone on
skills.
silent for a little bit.
This is a very memorable boss, the first boss from R-Type, one of my favorite bosses, and it uses a great way of implicitly...
Dude pulls out a 9-year-old Destiny fight.
Force slot that you send to infiltrate. It has this curvature.
I always feel like Gascoigne is comparable to Lady Butterfly. Both teach you the game fairly well. Yeah, and I think Lady Butterfly is actually... She would have been the great filter, and I think that kind of supports my theory that Hirata Estate used to be the original opening of the game. Because if it had been, then an hour in, like maybe 2 hours in, depending on how good you are at the game, your first time through, you meet Lady Butterfly, and you fight her, and you, like, actually learn how to play the game. Whereas, the way it works now is that you play, you go through, you fight Genichiro at the start, and oh my god, he destroys you. But that's fine, because you wake up, the game progresses, and you go on, and you move, and you're like... You go through Ashen Outskirts, and you meet the optional 7 Samurai guy, and you just grapple hook over him, and then you meet the ogre, and you figure out, like, oh wait, I can just cheese the ogre using the environment, because this is not an environment that's really conducive to a good boss fight. So you beat him, and there's another Ashina 7 Spears guy, and you just skip him, and then there's the Great Serpent, and like that's not really a boss, it's more like a stealth section, and that's fine. And then you keep going, and you meet Gyobu. You meet the great Gyobu Masataka Oniwa, and I guess he's sort of a filter. Maybe Gyobu is the filter. I feel. I don't know though, because I don't feel like I really learned the core of Sekiro when I fought Gyobu. I feel like that didn't really click for me until I was fighting Genichiro, and like specifically when I was fighting the Guardian Ape. I feel like I finally kind of got it. But I guess you could argue Gyobu was meant to be that boss. The bull and the ogre teach you the game perfectly. Oh yeah, you have the blazing bull. The Blazing Bull comes after... it comes after Gyobu. It's right before Ashina Castle. I think Hollow Knight's first boss, the fatty, is also very good for learning. Oh my god, I don't remember the fatty name. You had an extremely easy time with a horse boss, more so than Lady Butterfly. Yeah, like I think Lady Butterfly... The whole point of that fight is just parry. If you can just get her into a corner, and you can just parry her ass endlessly, and then just throw shurikens when she tries to jump up, you can just lock her completely out of the fight. It's ridiculous. And that's kind of like the whole point of that fight is don't be like, if you're endlessly aggressive, or if you're endlessly trying to punish like you do in Souls, she's just going to kill you then and there. You have to sort of, it's a rhythmic thing. You have to sort of, you have to parry, because you're also dealing damage while you parry, and I think Lady Butterfly really enforces that. So once again, I think Hirata Estate used to be the intro. Fatty with a mace. You can say that, like you can describe the boss. I don't remember. It's been like 3 or 4 years since I played Hollow Knight, sadly. No, the weapons in Final Fantasy VII, I think those guys suck.
Party members of the game, and it really changes the way you interact with the boss.
But that's kind of cool, though.
Another interesting handicap is the last boss in Shadow of the Colossus. Following the tragic loss of your horse aggro, you don't have the speed and capabilities that the boss allows you to do, so you have to use evasion and stealth in the first phase of the battle.
Yeah, I mean, he's not incorrect, but like, there's a lot of bosses in this game that you have to leave aggro outside and then sort of shimmy your way into the temple or wherever the boss is and fight the boss there. I guess emphasizing stealth is kind of makes sense. What I would say, what I really like about this fight is that it's kind of like Bob Bomb, in that when Bob Bomb catches you in Mario 64, he just throws you off the mountain, and you just lose progress. And when Malice shoots you, you basically just get shot way back into the battlefield, and you have to redo a lot of stuff. I always like that more. I think it's best when damage is just you lose progress rather than you die. And as I say that, like, the bosses in my game, they are gonna kill you. Sorry, I don't follow my own prescriptions here, but yeah, like it's weird that he would emphasize Malice again here, even though he's like kind of correct.
This is the last boss in Sonic 2. In this case, the entire level does not have any rings, which creates this, well, it takes illusion of risk, and the boss feels much harder, which is kind of a different way of playing the game. This is Berserker, in a game with a first-person shooter or third-person shooter, where all you need to do is hunt down enemies. In this case, you can't do that. You have to lure the enemy to follow you around into the light to be hunted down by the Hammer of Dawn Death Ray.
Oh, that's cool.
And this is Ray from Uncharted 4. And a lot of
oh, I hated this fight.
Which open up infinite opportunities to introduce different skills. This is not exactly expected, but this battle has it's basically a glorified sword fight using.
Yeah. See, this is one of those things that I'm not a big fan of. I don't like it when you're playing a game and then because the game wants to put up a cool sequence, all of a sudden you're playing a different game, right? And I think that's sort of a testament to how weak the core mechanics of Uncharted are, that they couldn't just give you a boss fight that plays normally. Like, imagine if, I think there was an Indiana Jones game where you used the different joysticks to punch. Imagine if this was square and this was circle. And every time you play the game, you punch with your left hand using square and you punch with your right hand using circle. And then they just integrate a sword into that and it's the same control scheme. Like, that makes sense. And obviously, like, they've locked the camera down here. It just sort of pans with the characters. And they've locked Drake's forwards facing direction so that he's always facing Rafe. Obviously, like, they're sort of directing. There's just more player direction in the fight itself, which I'm not opposed to, but introducing like a new challenge that hasn't really been core to any of the rest of the game, I think is really weak. And I think on Uncharted 4, that was more about this and less about taking cover and shooting enemies. I think that's a better game. So if you're just like Indiana Jones punching your way through a bunch of guys using these sorts of mechanics. Died only once in Snail? Really? That's interesting. To be fair, the Snail Alpha is very poorly balanced. Sometimes, like, I've seen some playthroughs of it, and it's just like sometimes an enemy will attack you once and the enemy won't even spawn an attack weapon and you'll just die, even if you have your shield up. And I'm like, huh, how did that code get through? What is this GDC talk, man? Bro just keeps listing stuff superficially. Yeah, like I said earlier, I feel like this probably would have benefited from a bit more breathing on every single title he's talking about here, because he's just sort of talking about vague topics, which I guess it's fine. We can just expand on those topics ourselves. But yeah, supposed to be a list of boss fundamentals. Yeah, like, these are fundamentals. He's just not really delving too deep into them. Can you make the third to last boss in your game super easy, but so that if it hits you, you get sent back to the very beginning of the game with no warning? I could, but I'm not doing that. Mikolash was the best boss. I like Mikolash.
2 buttons. You know how to sort?
Majestic! He goes.
Only boss in Portal, which introduces a new constraint. This is the time constraint, or at least the explicit time constraint that was not available before.
Okay, so I distinctly recall us watching the Portal 2 GDC talk, and they were like, yeah, so we kind of screwed up with the Portal 1 boss. from his description of bosses at the start, I had a feeling this would be painfully unfocused. Yeah, I guess.
Also, bosses allow you to use multi-skill, combining multi-skill into one epic battle. This is weekly from Portal 2, which forces you to use all the different things that you learned throughout it. Going back to Shadow of the Colossus, this is a phased...
See, I think Shadow of the Colossus is a really good sort of counterexample to the way Uncharted works, where they removed Colossi from the game. Like, there's a lot of Colossi, I think there's like 12 Colossi still on the game files in some capacity that have been found. And some of them, like, there was a big spider boss, and the idea with the spider was that you would ride aggro around the spider's legs, and you would hack at the legs while riding close to them, and you would just chop the legs down until the spider just collapsed, and you'd be able to run up to its weak spot and attack it. And Ueda said that the reason they didn't include that boss was because they would have had to create a very specific hacking while riding the horse attack animation, and doing that for one boss didn't feel elegant. Like, you're just expanding on the core control scheme to accommodate one fight. It just, it doesn't feel like a natural expression of the gameplay at that point. I think the Turtle did ultimately end up working something like that, though, where it's also got does it? Or maybe not. But yeah, so like that's a very different attitude to take towards these boss designs, where your core mechanic, like the boss needs to just use the core mechanics. It doesn't need to use all of them, and you can obviously direct the experience more and less. But I really prefer it when they don't just introduce they don't just make you play a different game now because we need to because Drake wasn't controllable enough to do a sword fight. I really love it when, like, if you're gonna make me play a new game, make me play it with the core mechanics. So like, in A Link to the Past, they could have just done Pong. There's a game called Pinobi that I played a lot. It's a Game Boy Advance game. You play a little Mac B guy, and there's one of the bosses is a spider. It's a side scroller game, and there's a spider boss, and it's above you throughout the whole map, and it drops bombs at you. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to bounce into the bombs before they drop, and then you redirect the bombs to shoot back at the spider. I love that. And that's a boss they did just completely with their normal mechanics. They didn't need to introduce any new shit for Pinobi to be able to do. Right? They didn't need to give you any new button prompts. It's just a natural extension of the core gameplay.
Set of skills, every phase has a different unique skill.
And like for Shadow of the Colossus, what can you do? Well, you can stab, you can climb, you can lure, you can shoot with a bow, you can run, you can climb. I think I said climb already. You can use the light to expose a weak spot, and every boss is just how can we configure these we have 10 different inputs, if that the player has access to interact with the boss with, and every phase of the boss is asking the player to utilize one of those, and we just sort of need to recontextualize what those do, and it's Shadow of the Colossus. The game speaks for itself.
The first part forces you to shoot down the stacks, making this standard.
You liking the Game Boy Advance game? I haven't played that. I've played that game so many times. I loved Pinobi. I don't know if it holds up, but I have a lot of fond memories from that game. There's also a great fight against like a mosquito that then separates into a horde of mosquitoes, and then it transforms itself into like a pair of scissors that chase you around the map, and then it's like a big hammer that tries to pound you around the map, and it like changes back into a horde of mosquitoes, and then goes back into being a big mosquito. And I think you can only attack it when it is a horde of mosquitoes. And yeah, I love that fight too. And this is a good fight, Mr. Freeze.
Bosses again from the Arkham series. This one also tests different particular skills, but gives you the choice of how to introduce them. You choose when to try out every different skill, and once you do, the boss even tells you that you cannot use that anymore. You're going to be protected from that, which is, I believe, a great way of testing out different skills. And of course, the side skills.
Mr. Freeze, great fight.
About, space.
16 Colossi, if I recall. Yep.
In this case, the skill is to get a 777 in space. In Metroid Prime, which is a 3D action-adventure game, you get kind of a glimpse to a different game. Spider Guardian is basically a 2D puzzle game, which is again something that only a boss.
But like,
do,
okay,
think about it.
I'm gonna go back on my word a little bit. It's not that this is never good, but a one-off encounter, like this is okay because this isn't the only time you're transforming yourself into a little ball. It's the same with System Shock. When System Shock asks you to go into cyberspace, if it's a one-off thing and you're just giving me a brand new game to play for one session, for one sequence, it always just feels to me like the developer going, yeah, I kind of screwed up with the core mechanics. But, you do this multiple times in Metroid. Being a little screw attack ball guy. Isn't this a screw attack? I think it's a screw attack. So that's obviously different.
One of my favorites, this is the Bride from Mist Explosion Man.
I feel like all of his fights are one of his favorites.
If you will, to another game. This is basically a tribute to Punch-Out.
Oof.
And this is from last year, Dr. Robotnik's Mean Bean Machine from Sonic Mania, which is another glimpse to a different...
Sonic Mania was in 2017? Wow, we're getting old, gang.
Essentially a session of Puyo Puyo. All right, let's move on to the actual confrontation. Right, so design attack patterns around the tested skill that we just established, and how do we encourage interaction between the boss and the player. Dracula from Castlevania is a boss that basically tests jumping and hitting from very close range. Now, in order to support that skill, the attack pattern uses the negative space that is left by that skill, and forces the player to get very close to the boss and jump over it. So if you think about it, we are using
this. To me, I've never fought Dracula in the original Castlevania. This, to me, feels like a much tighter setup for the Yellow Devil boss for Mega Man we were talking about earlier. It's always the same attack. There's no randomized pattern or anything like that. And I don't know if the Yellow Devil has randomized patterns, but like it looks like it has randomized. Like it looks like it could have randomized patterns. Whereas this is always the same presentation. And it's one attack rather than you standing there for 5 seconds while the balls just shoot at you. And it feels like there's actually, like, because Dracula disappears, it feels like there's actually some intent behind Dracula not being on screen. You're like a little bit tense. Where's Dracula going to show up? And then you need to time your jump correctly. It's like, it feels like a much tighter directed fight.
And complementing the skill that
Guy just wants to brag about all the games he's played. Spider would have been my favorite fight if I got it. If it got in. I think my favorite would have been the Devil or the Phoenix. I've thought about, and this is kind of crazy, Chad. I've thought about it like a 10%. There's like a 10% part of me that's thought about after Snails of Skeletons, I'll just spend a couple of years modding all of the Shadow of the Colossi back into the game. Like I'll create little arenas for them, and I'll code the bosses such that you can interact with them. But that's probably also going to be a nightmare because I'm working on like an engine configured for the PlayStation 2. Is it wrong to like the first Castlevania more than Symphony? No, I feel like those are very different games. I think Castlevania has that Mega Man thing where it's more about sort of just high-end memorization of enemies, locations, and such, and the general tension and anxiety you get the further you play into the game. Whereas Symphony of the Night is more of a baby's first Super Metroid.
Cuphead from last year did a fantastic job in pretty much every boss in establishing a specific skill, and then creating a negative space that forces you to interact in a certain way.
Aria of Sorrow.
Bosses, bullet hells like Dananpachi Daikratsu are a great example of the idea of the negative space. Because if you think about it, and as we can see, the boss can kill you whenever they want. If the designers wished to kill you, they would just shoot an endless amount of bullets, or the bullet with an infinite speed. But in this case, we are actually trying to not kill the player. We're planning how to keep them alive. And you can see that even within the bullet hell, there are paths that are allowed for the player to use. So that's what we're planning. We're planning the paths. Another great example is from Contra. Pretty much a lot of the bosses there create the idea of the counterattack. So you are attacking the boss as they attack you. And that creates kind of a poetic justice, of course. But also an element here that's very useful for designing a boss, which is creating this short time window and a limited space, which forces us to have this confrontation and this cycle of evading.
Aria of Sorrow was a Game Boy Advance game.
We saw the King of Bommel from N64. This is
like you can see, I'm not the biggest Castlevania.
It's pretty much exactly the same idea. It teaches you how to grab and throw, but it uses a completely different way. It throws a bomb at you, which again is kind of.
Oh, is that how I did it for because I remember Mario 64 DS, the remake, had some differences. Like you could play as Wario, and I think they locked specific powers for specific characters. So like you couldn't be Metal Mario anymore; you had to be Metal Wario, which I didn't like. But this seems like a good idea. Like if you're doing, if you're playing through this, I think you had to maybe beat Bob Bomb as Yoshi before you could play as Mario. I think that was the gimmick. But I didn't even remember they changed the fight up. But yeah, this makes a lot of sense. You know, throw the bomb, you know, and what's the point of the boss? It's to teach you something. He teaches Yoshi to spit a bomb out. He teaches Mario to throw. It's like cool idea.
This deflection that it requires puts the player in the line of fire and forces this interaction between the boss and the player. One of my favorite bosses, at least from the Zelda series,
this is a great fight.
Which again forces this interaction between you and the bosses. In this case, you deflect the attack of one sister against the other.
And I think it uses the same shield deflect thingy that you have for the Spirit Temple near the end of the game.
One of my favorite bosses, Justicia from Bayonetta, in another game.
Okay, again, he's like one of my favorite bosses. One of my favorite bosses. One of my favorite bosses.
In this case, it's another type of counterattack. It creates a path,
this must have been a nightmare to program.
By attacking, it creates a path for its own destruction. Another version of that can be found in Dingodile from Crash Bandicoot Warp. You lure Dingodile to shoot at you, thus creating a path that you can use to destroy him. You can see also that
I'd completely forgotten this fight. They redid this fight in Twinsanity, and it is the craziest boss fight of all time. I don't know what it is that makes that fight so difficult, but it is wild. It is like when I replayed that game for the Crash 270 video, I was like, well, you know, I played Crash 270 when I was younger. I can probably beat these guys now. And it's like, nope, I was still stuck on him for hours, and I was getting so mad, and I was like, I felt so vindicated. It's like when I was younger and I was stuck on the guy for like a week. I felt so vindicated being a grown-up and being like, yeah, see, he was difficult.
The arena, in this case, was perfectly tailored for this specific battle, which leads us to the arena layout. Again, we're trying to create an arena that complements the battle and is based on that specific fight. This is Cyber Demon from Doom from 2016. In both phases of the battle, the arena is very small, open, no place to hide, kind of reminiscent of olden times as well, and it increases the confrontation. And even further, so during the second phase, it uses this temporary layout change that it creates this lane that restricts your motion and makes the confrontation even more obvious. But the idea is that the arena is always designed and tailored to that specific boss battle. This is a boss that moves extremely fast and is partially invisible. You don't know where by looking where the attacks come from, you know where the boss would be, and also they made a lot of fences and barriers that you can use in order to protect yourself. Also a bunch of different hubs for interaction. Lighting
Ooh, Spectre Knight.
Way of introducing the layout. In this case, the Spectre Knight boss in Shovel Knight uses the shadows to hide, and if you haven't noticed how it moves in the first phase of the fight, you wouldn't even know how to interact with it. So it kind of teaches and then tests your ability. And one of the most important points in boss battles is the attack space. And I'm referring to the idea that you can employ multiple approaches or strategies against the boss. I think a good boss can be beaten in multiple ways, or at least different players can interact with it in different ways. In this case, this is Thornstein's Smile from Dark Souls.
Ooh, what did he say?
Different players can interact with it in different ways. In this case, this is Thornstein's Smile from Dark Souls.
Ornstein and Smile. Nope. Fake gamer. But yeah, obviously the more customization options you have, the more you are going to need to be able to accommodate different approaches to different fights. And this is why I think Elden Ring's bosses are kind of dog shit. Even compared to Dark Souls, it's just like there's so many options to play the game differently in Elden Ring, that to try and accommodate the lowest, to try to make every weapon and every build actually viable, it's just so much harder, and I just don't think they nailed it. I feel like every boss in that game almost was more or less designed for Sekiro, and then they just sort of crammed it into Elden Ring.
A fantastic boss that is particularly remembered because of
Casual,
two bosses, really. One of them is quick and weak, and the other one is very
It's
powerful.
wild to me
So
that
when you
Ornstein is
choose
more
how
like
to
this
attack,
legendary
the
boss fight, and the whole
and
point of the
tutorial.
fight, the only thing people remember is that,
I'm not a huge
oh,
fan
it's
of
two
play,
guys
but,
instead of one. Instead of one.
Battles are Archimon from Dragon Age Origins, also known for its various different strategies can be used in order to beat the boss. I think once again, Big Daddy, it's one of the first games that allow you to have these different approaches and emerging.
Well, yeah, this is an immersive sim,
Big Daddy
so
by
obviously it has
shotguns,
different
electricity,
approaches.
telekinetically moving booby traps, and even hypnotizing one Big Daddy against another. All right, moving on to clarity. We need to make sure that we avoid unpredictability, obscurity, and randomness by setting clear goal progression in hits and predictable attacks. So the idea of a clear target is very obvious.
I love that he keeps bringing this fight up. It's clearly like a lot of love for this guy. Do I think Elden Ring should have had a grappling hook? I don't think it should have. I think it would have been cool if it had one. Because, I don't think Elden Ring has that many really interesting to navigate areas that the grapple hook really would have hurt the experience. So like if you play as one of the guys from the Land of Reeds, from Ashina, maybe you don't get torrent. Maybe you just get a grapple hook, and then you can actually you can meet up with Ronnie and with Melania, and you can get torrent. Or if you have torrent, if you're like a knight guy. If you're like from one of those classes, you can go and you can find the grapple hook. But no, I don't think it needed it. And obviously, probably a nightmare to design in addition to everything else.
There's even a funny article from the
Could have been cool, but
I
can imagine ways of I can imagine easier ways of making Elden Ring cool than adding a complex grappling mechanic. Clear target. Something I'm interested in is that, and I'm just running through the Colossi fights. I don't think there's a single instance of a Colossi fight where you use the laser for anything other than to find your target, and there's a sort of consistency in that. You can certainly argue that maybe if you just want to do elegance in design, you could have used this redirecting the light thingy to blind the boss and just have it sort of cover its face, and maybe that exposes it somehow. But maybe that's not elegant, because now you're adding a new function to a weapon, to a tool, to an interaction you already have. And then players in subsequent Colossi fights might think, oh, is that how this fight plays? And you kind of have to reinforce that, and then, maybe it's better. Maybe it's better that they don't utilize this outside of its one specific function, which is direction.
Bosses, particularly when you have a large boss with multiple weak points.
Some bosses were leftovers from Dark Souls 3 and Bloodborne 2.
Some sort of guidance is needed. In this case, the sword that lights up the next target. In some cases, guidance is not needed. This is Dark Link. You don't need to know its particular weak spots, because it is you. You know its strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
It reminded me of Mirror Prince from Prince of Persia. The first phase, the first part of the game, you create this Mirror Prince by going through a mirror. The second part, you have to battle it. And in this case, the challenge is a logical challenge, figuring out how to beat it by lowering your sword and moving into him. And this is the puzzle battle. And I really enjoy bosses that employ logic, and figuring out the goal is the challenge in this case. And one thing that's very, very important, and I can talk a lot about this, and I don't want to spend too much time on it, but the idea is that you either employ logic or skill, but try to avoid doing both at the same exact time. The reason is what I call the delta of chance, and I'm going to talk about that later. Delta of chance is that when you believe that you succeeded, and then immediately fail because there's an additional challenge, and vice versa. that creates a very unsatisfying moment. Clear progression. We talked about the glowing red point, which creates a focal call to action. You can
This
also
guy
see
again.
that this particular game and most games of the time, we have a clear hit. You can see a couple of frames that change the color. And but also, of course, the health bar, which we've all grown accustomed to in many bosses. Not every boss has health bars. In some cases, you don't really need it, as long as you have a clear understanding of how far you've gotten. This is the first phase of...
Yeah, I think this is really the only justification for why Shadow of the Colossus has a health bar for bosses, because you need to sort of reinforce in a really clear way that just slashing your sword at the bosses is not the way to do things, and that actually attacking the weak spot is like, that's the Mondo way to do things. I think that's the only justification you can find for giving the bosses their health bars, because the game really, like, it doesn't need it, other than maybe just to sort of reinforce that. Read the text on the screen with the Skeletor voice to make it seem more valid.
hive mind in Dead Space. There are a couple of pods five pods that you need to destroy, and by seeing how many you have left, you have a clear understanding of the progression.
My understanding is that Skeletor doesn't like soup.
In the early games, this is a space area. They use
Or spoo.
trick of changing the color of the boss as they use health.
Also reinforcing that charging your stabs is good. That's true. That's good. That's a good observation.
An interesting aspect is a way of...
I guess you could argue that they could have done that with just the blood spurts, but then, like, I don't know. I feel like the visceral impact of doing damage to the Colossi would be lessened if they didn't have the health bars.
Presenting your progression is done in Cuphead. So
you didn't do the charging attacks on your first attempt.
Which, if you think about it, is actually quite clever, because this is where you potentially lose players just before a potential rage quit. They can see how far they've gotten. So that's a very interesting prospect. It also shows you the phase, which gives you even further indication of where you are. When talking about Cuphead, it's incredibly important to have a predictable attack, because predictability is control, and when you know how the bullets, the many different bullets or attack types, go in the next frame, you have control over the battle. And as long as you have information...
Yeah, and like Cuphead is also just, there's so much crap going on the screen at all times, and you're like, any amount of randomness, and the player is just gonna lose it.
In time to react, you can beat any boss. Some bosses kind of put you in a position where you don't have enough time. This is, again, the first boss in Shinobi, which is notorious for its randomness in the attacks. I think in this case they actually wanted to create this panic in order to force the player to use the magic. But generally, randomness is very risky. Going back to the Space Harrier, another interesting point is that while in 2D it's very clear to see an attack coming, it's very clear to extrapolate its position. In 3D, it's not that easy. I think we've evolved in a way that a change in scale is not that visible. Some 3D games do it better. So going back to Cyber Demon, as long as it's visible enough that something is going directly at you, then you should be fine. In this case, the flare behind the rocket gives you just enough information to know if they...
Only thing I hate about Cuphead are the random pieces of environment that sometimes appear before your character and you can't see yourself anymore. Were there a lot of those? I don't remember. But yeah, I figured that would be probably really annoying.
Another cool trick from Barba's fight, it always attacks you sideways and then slams...
the thing about Cuphead is that they first announced Cuphead, I think they first announced Cuphead, at least like in front of a big audience, in that Xbox showcase. And it was the highlight of the showcase, even though it was on screen for like 10 seconds. And it's a game that was completely marketed and completely sold on having a really cool and fun art style. But the fact that it's also like, no, it's just like a really hardcore video game, I think was so cool. Because that game could have very easily just been, you see a lot of this stuff on Reddit or on like indie game Twitter or whatever. And it's like, I'm making a game with just crochet. And I crochet every frame of animation. And then I Photoshop the crochet and I put it in the computer. Or like I'm hand painting every single frame of animation in the game, and it's like, okay, I am not actually all that impressed with having a quirky or fun visual style, but when you have it, and you have something else going on like Cuphead, or I guess like yeah, like Cuphead. That's always like so cool because you didn't. It wasn't just a gimmick. There was actual meat on these bones. Oh, you're not playing Cuphead.
Just enough information and time to react. But you don't always have enough information or time to react. So you have to compensate with enough information. The preemptive shadow, as I call it here, is highlighting where the hit is going to land. This is both the fireballs and the bombs as well. So, and if you think about it, it kind of compensates for the lack of information that we as spectators have. If Mario can look up and see the bombs falling, we don't have that luxury. So by providing that guidance, it gives us just enough information to react.
Yes, this is also why whenever jumping or flying occurs in video games, you really want to have a shadow underneath the enemy so that you can see what their fixed location is relative to yourself. Especially true in platformers. I don't think they ever made a Mario game, 3D Mario game, where you didn't have a shadow underneath them. And if you want to, again, I talked about Crash to Insanity earlier. The biggest flaw with Crash to Insanity is that sometimes Crash does not have a shadow underneath him. And it's really weird, but just sometimes randomly, some crates you're jumping on or like a piece of level geometry, there's just no shadow there. And you just have no idea where you are located in the in the sort of 3D space. Ratchet and Clank never did that shit. I think with Ratchet and Clank, from memory, what they did was they had the model, and they squashed it down to create the 2D image that was then the shadow. By using, I think they had, oh my god, I don't remember if it was done in real time, or if they rendered the shadow from all of the animations and then just drew it underneath Ratchet. As it was appropriate. I was recently watching the developer commentary. They went over it in more depth. Maybe I should have paid attention, huh?
This is Hellblade. And in Hellblade, of course, and in many other games, they use preemptive animation. It gives you well enough time to see when and where the next attack is coming by having this animation of the enemy. Also, it uses another cool trick to introduce...
Here's another cool trick.
By actually literally saying that attacks are coming behind you, using the voices in Senua's head, which I thought was brilliant. This is El Lanchador from Rayman Legends. It uses multiple telegraphing methods.
Every boss has this fight. The one where the big guy just slams hands down at you.
You have the shadow that gives you information on the position or location of the attack, and the animation for the timing. So with the timing and the position, you have just enough information to respond. Another cool telegraphing method used in the Master Hand and Super.
There's a mod for emulation that adds the shadow for the metal boxes. Yes! Yes!
Smash Brothers throughout the series, these kind of implicit hand gestures give you enough information to know when the next attack is coming. This should be fun. Once again, Rafe and other battles in the franchise. If you notice, just before the hit lands, it slows it down just enough to give you time to react, which is some sort of telegraphing, but kind of changing reality slightly. This should be fun. So the first battles in Punch-Out, they start pretty slowly. They have a lot of preemptive animations, giving you just enough time to respond. But as the battles progress and it gets harder and harder, you have less and less time to react. In fact, the Mike Tyson battle doesn't really give you enough time to respond to any attack. And the only way you would know what to do is by observing the previous attacks and timing them and memorizing them and basically anticipate in order to survive. Because the previous waves telegraph the next waves. And that's what you see also in Cuphead many, many times. The first attack, like in this case the egg, is extremely risky. You don't even know what it does. And in fact, if you're in the wrong place, you would die the first time you see it. But once you see it once, you know how to react the next time. And this happens constantly in this game. It works very well for a game that has a lot of these.
I also feel like Cuphead has really generous hitboxes.
A less common example, this Little Horn from Super Meat Boy. This entire boss is built on memorization. It has 13 different stages that you need to memorize each one of them in order to survive, which works very well for this game because this game is all about dying multiple times. All right, let's move on to difficulty. All right, we're going to talk about Delta of Chance, which I mentioned before, and the fact that we are here to reward and not to punish. So the Delta of Chance. If you look at any phase or any even attack type in a boss or any kind of interaction with an enemy, you usually see, or you better see, a challenging peak followed by a foreseeable end. You can actually see where it's going to end, and a noticeable easing between them. And the idea of Delta of Chance is that, well, a positive Delta of Chance puts you in a position where you see an anticipated failure and heightened risk, followed by an anticipated triumph. Not immediate triumph, but an anticipated triumph. And that translates directly into the behavior of dopamine. Now, I'm not a chemist, a biochemist, but
what is this guy talking about? I dropped out for a little second here. This is like the Walter White of game development here. Positive delta of chance, anticipated failure, anticipated triumph. Okay.
It's pretty recent that they studied this neurotransmitter and realized that its behavior really rewards and encourages behavior that leads to a positive change in your behavior. And there's always kind of a low dosage of dopamine that changes, it peaks when you have this positive delta of chance and completely stops when you have the negative delta of chance, kind of in the evolutionary.
Mike Tyson world record needs 8 frame perfect inputs. Oof.
Way of teaching you how to work and advance in the world. In our world, you can kind of imagine that if you think about playing a game of Tetris, where you can see that you're almost going to fail, and then you see that the next piece is a long piece. Sometimes you would want to kind of wait and extend that amazing moment that you know that you've just survived. And that feeling is what I believe is one of the most important and one of the biggest takeaways I think you should have from this talk is, and it is something that I also learned kind of recently because I made a game that is extremely difficult.
So, I'm something of a Tetris expert. This is not a good way to play Tetris. From memory, the way you want to configure these setups is that these pieces should never, you always want them to stand, but you always want to slam them right to the ends to just sort of close off the parameters, and then never, don't do this. You should have, you had a blue piece here. I guess you had a yellow piece, but you had a yellow piece before that, and you could have slammed the yellow piece down. You could have closed these two, and then you had a blue piece, and you could have don't do this. Don't lock 4 rows away from having the hope of getting one of these, because this is how you get to the place of, oh, I'm just stacking shit up here, and now I have these weird holes in my blocks.
Well, we know that.
A tech expert.
Making sure that
Yes.
there's a challenging peak followed by a kind of anticipated triumph is extremely important, and I can see this in pretty much all the good bosses that I surveyed. And this is one of the reasons why, because every attack wave has a very challenging peak right in the middle of that attack. You are attacked by multiple different pieces. You are forced in this very narrow space. And once you survive this, you start seeing less and less pieces coming towards you, and they get more anticipated. You see where they're coming because those are the only ones left. And there's a good 1 second where you know that you've survived a very difficult challenge. And that second is extremely addicting and satisfying. And I think this is what we're looking for. A great example is from Intruder, from Gradius 2. The first part is one single fire snake, and then you hit it and it splits into 3. That moment becomes extremely difficult. But once you hit one snake and then the second one, you know that you survived it. The last part, the last few seconds are just very, very easy. So you have a few seconds of this wonderful satisfaction.
Okay, I actually really like that boss setup where it's really difficult because of how many enemies there are, but the moment you begin, the moment you take one of them out, it's a breeze.
Another great way, going back to Hive Mind, the first phase of the battle, after you destroyed the third pod, you're picked up always by the tentacle. And at that point, it seems like it gets a little harder because you're airborne, it's harder to aim.
The guy is actually the yellow devil in disguise. It's possible. It's more likely than you think.
Subconsciously, you know that you beat the first phase, and those few seconds of you aiming are very satisfying.
Wait, what did you say here?
First, you're not subject to the attacks of the tentacles, so subconsciously you know that you beat the first phase.
No. Consciously, you know that you beat the first phase. It's not subconsciously.
Are very satisfying. Now, this is not exactly a boss, but somehow it keeps coming back over and over again in discussions on the favorite bosses. This is a song from Guitar Hero 3, and I started looking at it and tried to figure out why people like it so much and mention it as a boss. And it had the same traits and qualities of a good boss. It has attack waves that heighten towards a very challenging, crazy peak. And once you reach that peak and cross it, it starts slowing down towards this satisfying moment where you can just kind of rest. You know you succeeded and kill the next one. And it's also very memorizable because it's a song. You know how to do this. All right, let's quickly talk about multi-phases. Now, there's a notion of creating phases just in order to extend the gameplay. And this is something that I really don't enjoy. I don't think that creating a long boss battle is something that's extremely important. It's not a way for you to extend how long people play your game. You are here to reward the player and provide some, in this case, break before increasing the difficulty slightly, or change the battle, or change it to a different skill. I also suggest taking into consideration the delta of chance, so make the break more anticipated and apply some easing towards it. And some great examples for phasing, as we've seen with the Sand Dragon, where each phase introduces a different challenge.
All right. Yeah.
This is a great boss battle from Nier Automata from last year. Soshi, the first phase, you have this force field that
Nier
protects the boss. You can
Automata.
attack it, but you can learn how it moves. The second part, where they turn
I think this guy loves bosses so much. Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. He's one of those employees.
off the power, you can actually attack,
Those
but you don't
damn
receive it.
employees
So
loving
those
their
are two
bosses
ways
so
to really
much.
complement each other very well. And last example from the Arkham series, this is Ra's al Ghul, where each one of the phases changes the rules completely. The oversized boss, then gravity or multiple instances.
This is a fun boss.
I think the idea
It's a
is
really
that you
weird
phase
boss.
and break the rules in a different way. Now
But
let's
it's
talk
fun.
a little bit about the difficulty level and pacifism. A lot of games introduce multiple difficulty level throughout the game. You can change it. The entire game becomes easier. Cuphead actually allows you to change the difficulty level per boss.
You're starting to fall asleep. Sometimes there's not a lot of energy. Like, I thought this guy was going to bring the energy. I'm also falling asleep over here. I'm very tired.
There are other bosses that give you the idea of non-fighting
this,
option, or maybe it's the basic option, but
Yeah, I mean, pacifism. Okay, this is a bullshit boss. I don't... And to this day, Nintendo still uses those hammer bros. Or like, somebody who throws a hammer at you. I know that was Bowser there. It's such bullshit,
whether or not you fight the
man.
boss,
It's such bull
the
crap.
challenge is still maintained. It's a different challenge. If you have the fire flower, then you hit the boss. If you don't have it, you're using timing instead. And again, the idea that non-fighting options can still maintain some challenge can be seen in Master from Fallout. In certain circumstances, and if you go through a specific branch of the dialogue, you can actually convince Master to self-destruct and avoid a very, very difficult battle. And if you think about it, it's not that you skipped the battle. You just
Imagine if
create a
Aesir
different
falls
challenge
asleep
for
and
yourself,
we're
or a
all
logical
here
challenge,
expecting some
and
good
a physical
impressions. I'll give you an impression of what's this guy's name? Itai Karen, and like I don't think this is a. I don't think he's doing a bad presentation. I just feel like he needed probably another 30 minutes to really expand on all of these topics. But like, here's my impression of this guy.
This is one of my favorite boss fights. It's from Mega Man. Look at him. Look at the yellow devil. Look at the little blobs. They fly at you. Okay, now let me show you another boss. This is one of my favorite bosses. Why, it's also Mega Man. It's also the yellow devil from Mega Man. Now, there's a few frames of anticipation there. Now, that makes the boss very difficult. But let me show you another one of my favorite bosses. Oh my god, it's yellow devil from Mega Man.
You get the idea. You get the idea.
And a great example is through Undertale. There are many types of confrontations.
People keep
confrontations
talking
are
about
in the
Undertale. Toby Fox, my mortal enemy. Is this GDC a TED Talk for gamers? Every GDC is a TED Talk for gamers.
fight. In fact, there's a true pacifist route that is also considered, I think, as the true ending for the game, that you can just avoid fighting all the bosses. And the challenge is still there. It's a slightly different challenge. There are other games that allow you to skip bosses because, again, the boss is a reward. If the player so chooses, they can just avoid the battle. And this is Spyro the Dragon, where we can use collectibles to progress and go through the balloonists. You can just avoid the battle if you have enough of the thing that you're collecting. And it's all about if the player just enjoys collecting, but they don't enjoy fighting, then that's their choice. And finally, Monster Hunter World, the whole point is...
For the current best time in Super Mario, you need to have one frame of leeway in the 4-8 castle. Mario Bros. Yeah, like I think speedrunning is most fun when, like, I think that when a game has been so optimized that you're literally counting like 2 seconds or a couple of frames, I think that sort of like, I'm not as interested in that. I think speedrunning is a lot more interesting during earlier experimental phases where players are sort of learning how to, climb up collision boxes the developers didn't intend the players to climb up. And that's sort of when the world record is falling from like 2 hours to 1 hour and 50 minutes, and then it's like falling by a minute every week, I think that's much more interesting. And there's like, oh my god, I found a new strat, and it totally changes everything.
That you choose
The more optimized the game becomes, the less I think it's interesting.
The battle is a reward, it's part of the game. It's not a punishment that you have to endure in order to get to the next world.
But then you watch guys who've played those highly optimized games for like a few weeks, and you're like, wow, you guys really know what you're doing.
Essential to the progression. Does it teach you something that you have to learn? Does it make sure that you're not going to be hurt later? And if not, then are you really excluding unable players that you considered as non-deserving? You remember that the battle must be rewarding, but players can enjoy different types of challenges. So I urge you to consider easy mode or alternate challenges. For example, I can definitely
Oof, chat. This guy needs to get good.
start designing bosses that can be either challenged physically or logically, and both ways are completely acceptable. And
Like I agree with him. I don't think this is like a bad thing, but I would say within the confines of the core mechanics, don't do the Uncharted thing of now it's a completely different game. Like at the last 2 minutes of of the game, don't do that. Don't do that.
of course, even skipping the boss, because it's the player's choice. If you want, you can always
And like skipping the boss, it depends on what your game is about. There's
the main
cases for
path
it.
with special items or access to different parts of the map if you so choose, or even different endings, as we've seen with some other games. And if you think about it, it actually increases your replay value, because if you let the players go all the way to the ending, they would enjoy and probably want to return to the bosses again, play them in like the original main path. It also exposes more people to your art, and this is a personal, personal thing for me, because I spent around 2 months working on an ending for Mushroom 11 that only less than 10% of the players actually reached, because the bosses, for example, and other challenges were extremely difficult.
I don't think that's why. 10% clear rate is not exceptionally rare. Most players don't finish games.
And most importantly, this allows us to really work towards true inclusiveness, and while not skipping on the actual challenge. So, in summary, I'm just going to call this out real quick. These are the rules. Reward, tell a story, locally source, skill test and intro, do not try to kill, keep everything clear, allow player expression during the battle, phase wisely, mind the difficulty curve and the delta of chance, and of course, most importantly, in boss battles.
You watching
rules are
Summoning
meant to-
Salt?
Thank you very much.
I'm not. I think somebody in chat is. Should skippable bosses be harder than obligatory ones, or at least give you a different challenge? I think that this idea of skippable bosses it's really sort of iffy. Like, imagine if Zelda did that. Imagine if Bloodborne did that. You're not gonna learn the core mechanics of your game if you're letting the player just skip the big sort of roadblock to actually coming to understand it. It makes sense in something in something like a Fallout, where a big part of the game is interacting with characters. And I guess you could make a case for it where I don't know. I feel like it's very much a case-by-case basis. I don't think this is a good idea for most games. But yeah.
If you have any questions, you can line up in front of the mics, if we have time. Yeah, 3 minutes. Go ahead.
Hey, so you went over.
Yeah, like in a Metroidvania, it totally makes sense to let the player skip some bosses. It totally makes sense. And it's not even a betrayal of the core conceit of the genre. It's just, you figured out a different way of going around the boss. That's completely in harmony with how Metroidvanias are made.
What the best bosses in games are, but what are the worst tropes that you would consider?
Alright, so we're starting out with a British guy. We'll get a German,
So
I think.
I had a bunch of those, and just as respect to my fellow designers, I try to avoid showing too many bad examples. I touched on a couple of things that I found not as useful. I showed, I think some of the bosses in Shinobi, for example, implemented some things that I would not necessarily implement in my own games. And again, I didn't want to talk about this too much, but some of the bosses and challenges in my own game were extremely difficult. And
Skippable in an option, like at least Parl. Yeah. Like I think having optional bosses, that's totally fine. I'll have to do my German accent again. My flawless German accent.
This all has been a personal learning for me, figuring out how and what makes a good boss battle. So I think I would definitely say my own game has some flaws. Go ahead.
So you mentioned having an easy mode for skipping skipping really hard bosses, but easy mode has a little bit of a stigma with a lot of players. Is there a different way that could be presented than just saying easy mode for bosses?
So actually, one of the things that I try to kind of mention.
Yes. It's talking to Hawkeye Golf and having him shoot Calamite so Calamite doesn't fly above you anymore. It's that sort of stuff. It's integrating a nerf in the game itself. It's summoning, for example. Stuff like that.
Final slide there is that we actually need to battle the stigma. Sure, I mean, you can figure out other ways of introducing easy mode, and I do agree that I don't like using UI.
Gonna sing a lullaby for Patreon supporters.
It kind of puts you in the mindset
I don't know about that.
and you're thinking that you're actually not as good as you are by just saying the word easy. So that's a really important point, and I do agree with you. However, the idea that we need to care about what some people say
That might make you pay your hard-earned art money.
something that we
I couldn't take money out of your hand. I couldn't take food out of your mouth to listen to me sing. I actually hold on. I did do something cool. Okay. For those of you that stick around until this GDC talk is over, I'll show you something cool that I did. They will copyright my ass for showing you this, so everybody better sign up to the channel Patreon, I swear to God. They're taking these delicious 12 cents these streams give me.
Hey, great talk. So Breath of the Wild, my experience with that was I played as much of the game as possible before getting to the final boss, and the final boss was super short because I was way overpowered, and I felt like I sort of missed the intended experience, or at least I felt as if it wasn't as satisfying for me. Have you thought about this, and what are your thoughts?
I hated that fight. We were me and Julia, we played it together, and we got to the boss with a lot of power. And I actually didn't like that battle too much. I thought it was, I don't know, laid out in a way that was kind of extended too much. I actually like a lot of the boss battles that Nintendo has that kind of have everything very laid out very well, where every phase has a different challenge. And I think maybe part of the thing, and to be fair, one of the amazing things that I love so much about Breath of the Wild is that you can have multiple approaches to do every single thing. But the problem is that you can't balance everything to the maximum. So in some cases, there are some strategies that are just better. And you probably found those. And I didn't, and I'll ask you what he did later. But honestly, I think this really allows this elaborate expression space for the player. So in some sense,
I don't really agree with this sentiment. I feel like a game like Breath of the Wild is so much about player expression, player freedom, and yeah, some approaches are going to be better than others, but it's not about if it's not about what approach is the best, it's about how do you want to play through the game. I don't know.
I think maybe you played it very well and you missed some of the things. That's part of the challenge for designing it.
So in a game that's focused around boss battles like Shadow of the Colossus, how would these rules change? How do you continue to teach when, or connects to the...
Okay, hold on. What is he saying?
That's part of the challenge for designing it.
So in a game that's focused around boss battles like Shadow of the Colossus, how would these rules change? How do you continue to teach when, or connects to the minions when there aren't minions, that are just bosses?
So that's actually a great example, and I was trying to not go over too many things because already I had 115 slides. Basically, the idea of boss rush and games that...
Yeah, he had 115 slides. Brother, you could have just cut 2/3 of that and focused way more in on, like, here's the really detailed stuff. And I get that you wanna go over all of it, but I genuinely think this would have been a better presentation if he'd have just let these things breathe a little bit and not rushed fast through a lot of these a lot of these topics. What are these questions? These are the questions, chat. We're waiting for the Germans.
I think Monster Hunter is a great example of kind of the non-linear way of giving you the choice of when to challenge a certain boss. But in this case, the way I see Shadow of the Colossus is that really, if you think about it, every boss or every Colossus is a level. And that level usually has multiple different challenges throughout that level. And usually, towards the end of the level, for example, the head of that monster, that's the boss, if you think about it. But each one of them, and that's something that I enjoyed tremendously in that game, is that each one of those bosses introduces something else. So I thought it worked out for that.
No. He's very wrong about that. The bosses don't introduce anything new. What they do is they just recontextualize the meaning of the same core interactions over and over again. Right? How many different ways can you interpret the idea of shooting a bow? Are you shooting a bow? What are you doing? Are you luring the boss with the bow? Are you damaging the boss with a bow? Are you shooting it in the eye so that it crashes into a wall or something while chasing you? It's like, it's not introducing anything new. It's just reconfiguring the old stuff again and again and again in interesting ways.
First of all, thank you kindly for giving this highly insightful speech. Now, earlier during the talk, actually at the very beginning, you did mention Silent Hill Homecoming, and that got me thinking, how exactly do you try to get boss fights right in a survival horror game, which emphasizes tension through tight resource management, and also feelings of occasional helplessness and powerlessness?
Oh, that's a great question. And to be fair, I only played a few. What I felt is that in terms of
he's a
boss battles in
poser.
Silent Hill, really.
He doesn't like the same games I do. That makes him a fake gamer.
Saw this is a great example how the theme really worked out with the mechanic. In this case, as you said, this anxiousness, this pressure that you feel while playing it, really gets.
Which is the best Silent Hill boss? It's not Pyramid Head. You know, people are gonna say, "Oh, what about Pyramid Head?" Pyramid Head's boss fights are kind of trash. Outside of how Pyramid Head in the basement will just walk away. But it's not Pyramid Head. I wonder... Is it the dick worm in Silent Hill 3, maybe? Oh, it's Sybil on the carousel, probably, or maybe Dark Alessa, maybe Alessa on the on the carousel in the third game. I think those are probably the best bosses. You're here to be the best
It could have been
fake
kind of
gamer. Oh, the Wall Daddy.
If this would be a kind of a happy, smiley face, but the idea of creating. This,
I think that's most of its power comes through the visceral nature of it. I'm more thinking about sort of the interaction and the art.
I'm not sure if I answered your question though, but
No, I think you answered it.
You like the
very well.
school
Thank
creature
you.
from Silent Hill 1? Oh yeah. Like you have to
Well,
wait
and
for
I
it to
think a lot of
open
what
its
did-
mouth and then you can pull the shotgun.
Which is fantastic. Went through a whole lot of examples. The majority of those examples were single-player boss battles. Do your rules change? Does your focus change when we're looking at multiplayer, and particularly more than just two people attacking a boss?
I think this is a great example. But if you think about it, it actually answers the same question, because you need to ask yourself what are the skills that you're trying to challenge. So I don't think I would be able to play Athenian very well. I know I wouldn't. So this is one of those things that as I'm seeing other people play it, I can see how they created a set of challenges that are particularly there, and not in other bosses necessarily, to challenge the collaboration. For example, in a lot of bosses in Destiny, you can see where other players are. So they created this time portal so you couldn't see that. So for every different skill, they made a challenge, kind of a negative space. So it's easy to talk about negative space in 2D games or 3D games, where like I want you to jump, so I'm going to shoot a couple of times to make sure that you jump as high as possible. But also, if I want to challenge your collaboration, then I'm going to put the players in a position that they can see each other.
Hey, so how would you handle having multiple, like a boss battle
Chat, I don't think we're gonna get no Germans.
in a game that is like a hero-based shooter or something like that? So, for example, if Overwatch had a boss battle and
I forgot its name, but I know it's. I'm glad you know it's one. Yeah, it's the abstract daddy.
you could choose any of their 24 characters, like assuming that the design philosophy is not to limit player choice in which characters they can bring into that battle.
Sorry, can you repeat that question? I think I.
Sure, yeah. Just it's a pretty.
Oh,
vague question, but,
maybe
like, what
maybe he's the German. He just asked him to repeat himself. Is he German? Untame Itai Karen. He doesn't sound German. Itai Karen. I think he's like
what are some
maybe
ideas
Middle
on how you would
Eastern
handle
or
a boss
something.
battle like where the player basically has too many options available and how they could approach the battle.
I think that's a great point because I was talking about the player expression space is something that is underutilized right now. In a lot of bosses.
Chicago-based.
The expression space is limited to, am I going to jump over 2 bullets or 1 bullet at a time? And they showed Ornstein and Smaug from Dark Souls, which kind of gives you this idea like, okay, I'm going to go through this one first and lead. When you have...
Damn you, man, dox yourself. Where are you
in
from?
some way, I think that's also kind of the art of designing. And to be fair, I think that's why I led my talk here to talk first about the skill set that you would like to
Brooklyn-based.
Once you establish a skill set, or multiple skill set, but there has to be some sort of clarity in what you're choosing, what you're presenting the player with. I think that
I don't know.
Just presenting too many different things kind of puts you in a point where the player would be helpless.
Hello.
So I think again,
Hey,
that's
why
my
is
point.
my own
There's
stream
no
playing back
perfect
at
way
me?
to tell you how to design a boss, like how do you place the bullets, what kind of how it moves from side to side, how do you attack towards the player or towards where they're going. All these things are eventually it's the art of designing. But in a sense, just having the clear view of what you're challenging, I think that's extremely important, and that needs to be limited but not singular. All right, I think we're out of time, so thank you very much.
Oh, no Germans, no Germans. Oh. All right, well, I think it's an interesting topic, and like I think that if he'd have gotten like an extra half an hour to maybe expand on a lot of the topics he was bringing up, I think that would have been, I think it would have been probably a better showcase. Maybe that's what I should have been doing instead of making fun of him and the Yellow Devil boss. But hey, we have fun. Aesir, time for the German accent. Okay, so chat, I'm gonna let you choose, but you can only choose one. Do you want the German accent? Or do you want the song? German accent or the song, chat? Which one do you want? Skeletor accent? Song. I'm seeing a lot of songs. Songs. Silver. Okay, I saw you. You can't vote twice. ADAC, you can't vote twice. Also, there's like a 10-second or something delay, so... I'm seeing these comments a bit later. Okay. Skeletor Spoo. I don't like Spoo. Soup. You'll vote as much as you can. Okay. So, everybody, I don't know how loud this is going to come through. So, be prepared that you may need to adjust your audio headset. Okay. Some of the video in the stream belongs to someone else. I am going to have to cut this section completely out of the video. But those of you that got to see it, you got to see it. Also, the choppy audio here was something. I'm going to go work on that now. Hope you all enjoyed that. I'm going to go... the secret section will live on in memory. Oh, yes. Oh, you screen recorded this? There's no... Oh no. Oh, no. Shirk. Coming in late. Catching the insanity. Alright. Insanity will exist in memory and maybe on the Discord, linked in the description. I'm gonna go end the stream and edit it so that I don't get copyright claimed and don't have to deal with that sort of stuff. Thanks everybody for coming. Hope you had a good stream. Bye bye.